俺の財宝か？欲しけりゃくれてやる。探せ！この世の全てをそこに置いてきた。
Yo guys, and welcome to this new video. This is the second one of the series dedicated to the Void Century, and while in the first we focused on trying to uncover the origins of the Ancient Kingdom and the true nature of the war that destroyed it, here we're going to focus on the mysterious person called Joy Boy and on which role he could have had in that erased history, mainly basing on the historical character Oda clearly took inspiration from. But before seeing all of that in detail, let me say I'm trying my best to publish a new video every day, so make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to always know when I upload something new. Alright, with that said, let's jump straight into it. So, in the previous video we underlined how the countries of Wano and Jaya were most likely very strongly connected during the Void Century, and they were probably both part of the same Great Kingdom that is the one Clover mentioned during the Ohara flashback. We also mentioned that just like Wano is directly inspired by the true world Japan, Jaya has the same relationship with the real world Java. And this correspondence is testified not only by the resemblance of the names, which however is a very important element because in One Piece names always have their specific meaning and reason, but also by the fact that Java was once considered a land rich of gold, and there are even reports of a city entirely made of silver. But the aspect making this correspondence much more solid and also relevant for the One Piece plot is Joy Boy himself. Indeed, the one thing we know about this mysterious person, his name, allows to start a correspondence between him and a historical character, which, as we will see, acquires more and more evidence as we dive into it, creating new connections between Joy Boy and other important mysteries of the plot, which we have the possibility to better understand by using as a model, you could say, the life, the deeds, and in this case the prophecies of one of the most important kings, if not the most important one, of the entire history of Java, King Joyoboyo. This person, whose name, as I mentioned before, is practically identical to Joy Boy's, ruled East Java during the central part of the 12th century, and he was considered such a just and prosperous king to be believed to be the Ratu Adil of that age. To understand what this means, we have to precise that Javanese believe in a cyclical history, where there is a period of sufferance that alternates with a period of prosperity, and the passage from the suffering to the prosperity is assigned by the appearance of this Ratu Adil, which literally means just king. A person who through his actions is capable to restore social justice, order and harmony in the world. And even if this aspect may not seem at this point too important for One Piece, keep it in mind because it will later in this video. For now, what it tells us is that if Joy Boy was indeed inspired by Joyoboyo, we have to assume he was this kind of just and prosperous king, and considering the relationship between Jaya and Java, he was probably the king of Jaya, and this actually suits very well with the fact that we first discovered the existence of this character and the fact he lived during the Void Century through his poneglyph letter in Fishman Island, which creates an immediate connection between him and the land where once was Shandora, because the poneglyph, which revealed the very existence of Poseidon and indicated as her location Fishman Island itself, was the one that Robin found in Skypiea but was originally located in Jaya. But the most important aspect about Joyoboyo, that can also make the connection between him and Joy Boy and the connection between Java, Jaya and also Wano and the real Japan much more solid and relevant for the One Piece plot, is what this Ratu Adil, this Just King, is most famous for all over the world. his prophecies, which is most likely the reason why Oda decided to adapt this character to his own story. Indeed, Joyo Boyo, who, as I said before, lived during the central part of the 12th century, and remember this date because it will be important later, during his life wrote that at some point after his death, Java would have been ruled by white-skinned people carrying weapons capable of firing from the distance, and this domination would last long, but then it would be followed by a short domination by yellow-skinned people coming from the north, and after that Java would be free and there would be the appearance of a new Ratu Adil, so the new Just King bringing justice, order and harmony, but in particular Joyo Boyo said that this king would be the greatest the world ever saw. And before going to the details of this appearance of the Ratu Adil that are clearly, strictly related to One Piece, I think it's important to underline that Joyo Boyo was actually right about everything he said. Because during the 16th century, Java indeed became a colony of the Netherlands that controlled and exploited the resources of that land, so the white-skinned people Joyo Boyo mentioned, but this domination ended in 1942, when Japanese people, so yellow-skinned people coming from the north, took control of the country, but only for 3 years, because in 1945 they left and Java became an independent land. So far everything went accordingly to Joyo Boyo's prophecy, which has no word to describe how incredible that is, and for this reason it's no surprise that Oda chose that king to be a character in his plot. The only thing that didn't happen yet is the appearance of the Ratu Adil, so the Just King that Joyo Boyo predicted would appear in a moment where iron wagons would drive without horses and when ships would sail the sky. Now, in our world, of course, this could refer to trains, cars and airplanes, but the thing is, we have correspondences also in the One Piece world. Indeed, for iron wagons that can move without horses, we can clearly take the sea train. And this is not only because it's the only train we ever saw in One Piece, but also because it was created in a city, Water 7, where because of the Venice-like structure of the city, people always move in wagons carried by Yagara bulls, that, if you think about it, are nothing more than overgrown sea horses. So we can see the Tom's Worker's great invention as Oda's adaptation of that part of Joyo Boyo's prophecy to One Piece. Indeed, in a place where people only use wagons carried by seahorses, it appears a wagon that can move without them, that is the sea train.
And since, as we said before, Joyo Boyo was most likely the king of Jaya and so an important ruler of the Ancient Kingdom, this connection between the real Joyo Boyo's prophecy and One Piece is also sustained by the fact that Water 7 was itself an island strictly connected to what happened during the Void Century, because it was where Pluton was created.
And before passing to the ship that can sail the sky part, all of this makes all the more sense if you consider an aspect that I told you to remember, the dates. Indeed, Joyo Boyo lived during the central part of the 12th century, and in particular he died in 1157. Now, even if the domination of the Netherlands didn't happen immediately, what's important here is that Japanese left the Indonesia, so including Java, at the end of the Second World War, so in 1945, with the freedom of the country being officially recognized by the Dutchies in 1949, so almost exactly 800 years after Joyo Boyo's death. So as you can see, the number exactly corresponds to the 800 years that passed since the end of the Void Century. And considering how the choices Oda makes for his plot always have a specific reason and meaning for being that way, as I said before for what concerns the names, in my opinion we can only be right in thinking that this is not a coincidence. So from this perspective, it doesn't look like a case not only that the Puffing Tom was born in this era, but maybe even one of those elements that could correspond to the part of the prophecy talking about ships that can sail the sky. Indeed, even if we could easily refer it to the ships that sail the White Sea, so the clouds around Skypiea, the fact that this actually happened for centuries now makes me leaning towards a much more fascinating interpretation. Indeed, if we interpret the sailing the sky part as flying, which is also most likely what Joyoboyo's prophecy meant, because it was probably referring to airplanes, in this era of the One Piece world, the one ship that sails the sky can be considered the Thousand Sunny, which is capable to fly even for kilometers through a couped burst. And the interesting thing about this correspondence is that we can try to see between the real King Joyoboyo's prophecy and the One Piece world is that during Roger's era, both the Sea Train and the Thousand Sunny didn't exist. So if through the correspondences between Joyoboyo and Joy Boy we try to transfer Joyoboyo's prophecy in One Piece, one way to think about this particular aspect is that Roger's era didn't met yet the conditions for the appearance of the Ratu Adil, the new Just King. And all of this becomes incredibly interesting if we dive a little bit more in detail about the part of the prophecy referring to the Ratu Adil itself. Indeed, Joyoboyo in his prophecy said that the Ratu Adil not only would be the descendant of a royal family, but to define him he used the words Noto Negoro. And today the most popular idea is that he meant the Ratu Adil would contain one syllable of this expression. So for this interpretation we have a king that anticipated the advent of his successor 800 years after his death, and this successor not only would carry the royal blood in his veins, but he will also have in his name identifying letters. And so it doesn't look so strange anymore that in One Piece there is a bunch of people carrying a strange and mysterious letter in their name, the D. And so at this point there are just too many resemblances with elements of the One Piece plot for them not to be part of how Oda adapted King Joyoboyo's prophecy to his own story. And so if we use this particular key to try to solve the mysteries around Joy Boy, what we have is a king of Jaya, and maybe probably also the king of the entire Ancient Kingdom, who during the Void Century was one of the reasons for the prosperity of the Ancient Kingdom itself, but that later lost the war against the founders of the world government, that, as we said in the previous video of this series, was probably a civil war, in a context where his ideals were strictly linked to Poseidon, and we can assume also to the other ancient weapons. And being aware of the imminent defeat, he decided to entrust his goals, his dream, to the descendants of a specific family, most likely of royal blood and maybe his own one, that are characterized by the letter D. Using the craftsman of Wano, which, as I said in the previous video, probably had a very important connection with Jaya, to write his will together with the history of the Void Century on the poneglyphs, and predicting, as written in his letter to Poseidon, that one day someone would have come to pursue again the dream he couldn't achieve. An ambition that, as we mentioned before, was most likely associated to the ancient weapons, seeing his relationship with Poseidon. And the fact that during Roger's era did not exist a mermaid with the power to speak to the Sea Kings can be seen as another aspect denying the Pirate King to be Joy Boy's prophesied heir. In this context, the last but also most difficult thing to try to discover is what Joy Boy's goal actually was. Now, since I want to talk about this goal and the ancient weapons specifically in another video of this series, what I want to talk about in this last part is how all of that is connected with giants. Indeed, in the previous video we already discussed how, for this theory, the giants were at the center of the civil war that caused the destruction of the ancient kingdom and the birth of the world government. And this is because colonizing the Red Line probably became the main goal of the people from the moon who descended on the blue planet and founded the ancient kingdom. And a proof of that can be that the very name Red Line and also Grand Line sound like names given by someone that can see them from above, so from the distance. But this is only possible in the One Piece world for the people who lived on the moon. And indeed, on one of the hieroglyphics shown in Ener's cover series, we can see clearly a person living on what seems to be the Red Line, and this can be considered not only a confirmation of how the winged folks were particularly concerned about that specific piece of Earth, the biggest one on the blue planet, but maybe also the fact that originally that land was inhabited by giants, since it's difficult to imagine that the populations living on the moon would have been able to see if someone lived on the Red Line if they had been normal-sized humans. This idea suits very well with how things are proportioned in Marijua, for example the entrance, but also the Pangaea Castle, which is enormous for human beings, and even the empty throne seems something that was not made for a human king. Moreover, the fact that the first 20 kings put their pledges around the throne, in my opinion, can only mean that they arrived there as conquerors, so after they won the war, and this is because if that was already their territory, leaving their weapons in that specific place doesn't make much sense. Instead, it's the fact that that land was particularly important for them and for the war that they decided to do that significant act in that place. What's more, the fact that despite you can count 20 weapons around the throne, you can also count one king. This means that probably those who left the pledges were not the entirety of the alliance. They most likely allied with the part of the ancient kingdom, the faction of the civil war that then won, which, if you saw my previous video, is the one associated with the prized class, so those who originally ruled the winged folks on the moon. And this supports even more the idea that the alliance that later founded the world government conquered that land in the name of him. And this suits very well with the great consideration that Tenryubito have for the place they call the Holy Land, which they consider a crime to leave. And last but not least, the giant straw hat, which is clearly something meant to be worn by a giant person. And considering how that race is enslaved and only started a relationship with the world government and the Marines thanks to Mother Caramel 100 years ago, combined with the fact they can possess D as testified by Saul, they were probably enemies of the world government during the Void Century. And so, putting all of these pieces together, it's not difficult to come to the conclusion that the giant straw hat was acquired when the world government won the war and conquered the Red Line. But then the straw hat becomes another connection between the giant race and Joy Boy, the first one being the D, as I said a moment ago, mentioning Hogwarts D. Saul, and the second, the similarities between the straw hat kept safe and hidden in Marijua and the one that passed from Roger, through Shanks, to Luffy. For this reason, the next video of this series will try to uncover both the secrets of the D and the true meaning of the Straw Hat. And so until next time, that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching, don't forget to leave a like and make sure to subscribe. See you next time. Gianè.